All right, today I'd like to talk about writing equations. We're going to go at it from two different directions. We're going to go at it from having a written phrase and translate it into an equation, and we're going to go from an equation and translate it into a written phrase. So there's just a few steps, and the first step is to read the verbal expression carefully. Okay? Read the problem. After you get done reading it, reread it and identify the operations, okay? And then write the equation using the proper operations, variables, and numbers. All right, let's take a look and see what that looks like. Here's our verbal phrase. It says 7 times a number squared is 5 times the difference of k and m. Well, let's go through it again, and this time we're going to identify any operations. Well, 7 times. Times means to multiply. And if we go on, a number squared, well, squared means to the power of 2. And if I look at this, is means equal to. And then it says 5 times, well, times again means to, multiply. And then we get to the difference of. So the difference of means to subtract. All right? Now let's go back through there and identify any numbers or variables. Well, the word 7 is the number 7. It's given us a number, but it's not given us a number, so it's an unknown number. Let's give it a variable. They've already used k and m, so let's use the letter n. Here's the word 5, so we've got the number 5. When it says the difference of, it means to subtract these two things, okay? So when we look at this, and we look at what we've come up with, it says 7 multiply n to the power of 2. So that's 7 times n squared is equal to, we've got to multiply 5 times the difference of k and m. So we've got to we have to subtract k and m before we multiply by 5. That means the difference of k and m needs to be in parentheses. So let's take a look and see what that might look like. We've got 7 multiply times a number squared, so we've got 7n squared, is equal to 5 times the difference, 5 times the difference of k and m. So it's k minus m. All right, let's try another one. This time we've got 15 times a number subtracted from 80 is 25. So we're going to read it again, and we're going to try to identify any operations. We've got 15 times. Well, times indicates multiplication. A number subtracted, well, subtracted means minus, and it says from 80, okay, it's telling us what we're subtracting from, is, okay, we remember is equals 25. So let's go through and identify any numbers or variables that weren't given. Well, the word 15, we've got the number 15. It says times a number. Well, that's an unknown number, so that's a variable. We can give it a variable here, I hope. N, okay? We've got the variable n. Minus, okay, we're subtracting that from 80, okay, is equal to 25, all right? If we read this closely, 15 times an n, that means multiply, so 15n, subtracted from, that means we're taking it away from 80, so the 80 has to come first. So we have 80 minus 15n is equal to 25. Let's take a look at that. 80 minus 15n is equal to 25. Let's do one more here. So we've got 2 plus the quotient of a number and 8 is the same as 16. Well, we know that plus means to add, It says the quotient of, well, quotient means to divide, and when it says the quotient of a number and 8, that means we've got to divide that number by 8, and then it says is the same as, well, is the same as is our equals part, 16. So let's put our numbers and any variable that we might have in there. I've got the number 2, so let's get it in there. It says we're going to add that, the quotient of a number and 8, so the number divided by 8, n over 8, is equal to 16. So let's take a look and see if we've got that right. We've got 2 plus, or 2 added with, the quotient of n divided by 8 is equal to 16. Well, let's go the other way now. Let's take a look at this and say, okay, we're given an equation that says 6z minus 15 is equal to 45. Well, let's look at each one of those terms and break it down. 6z, well, that could be 6 times z, it could be the product of 6 and z. There's several different ways we can write it. So we've got 6 times a number, and our number happens to be z, or the product of 6 and a number, because z is our unknown, so it's the unknown number. When it says minus 15, well, we can write it as just minus 15, or we could say 15 less than, okay? So, and then the last one is equals 45. Well, we can go with the is 45, or we could go with is the same as 45. So when we take a look at this, at the word phrases we have, we've got, we could go with 15 less than, that means we're taking 15 away from something. The product of 6 and a number is the same as 45, or is 45, or we could say 6 times a number minus 15 is 45. So I went with 15 less than the product of 6 and a number is equal to 45. Let's take a look at one more equation to a word phrase. This one we've got y to the second power plus 3x is equal to w. Well, a couple of different ways we could phrase y to the second power. We could say y raised to the second power, or we could just say y squared. When we have plus 3x, well, 3x is the product of 3 and x. So there's a couple different ways we could say that. We could say plus the product of 3 and x. We could also say increased by the product of 3 and x. Both of those mean to add. When we have equals w, well, we could go as simple as is equivalent to w, or we could even go simpler and say is w. So we've got a lot of choices there. We could say y raised to the second power plus the product of 3 and x is equivalent to w. We could say y squared increased by the product of 3 and x is w. And I went with y squared increased by the product of 3 and x is w. As you can see, there's lots of different ways to write these word phrases, but they all have to have the same meaning. So, I hope this has given you a little bit of insight into what we're doing today, and as always, reach out if you need a hand.